Uh, Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Entrepreneurship Development Cell and Incubation Center of St. Xavier's College, Kolkata, it is with great pleasure that I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you. It is with the utmost honor, privilege, and gratitude that I introduce to you a distinguished expert and inspirational leader, Mr. Pramod Arora. Mr. Arora is a seasoned professional with a proven track record of success in the real estate and entertainment industry. His career has been marked by innovation, strategic thinking, and a deep understanding of the evolving consumer landscape. As the current CEO of PVR, Mr. Arora has played a pivotal role in the growth and success of one of India's leading entertainment company. His career is a testament to his entrepreneurial spirit, his ability to identify and capitalize on emerging opportunities, and his commitment to innovation. We are beyond delighted to have you with us, sir, and share your invaluable insights, experiences, and expertise with our participants today. We are extremely thankful to you for taking time out of your busy schedule to engage with us in this session. On behalf of everyone here at EDCIC, I extend my best wishes to all the participants for an insightful and inspiring learning experience during this session. I now hand over the proceedings to you, sir.
Thank you, Nia, for your kind words. Uh, I'm humbled with your kind words. So, just a few disclaimers before we begin the session. Since I represent a publicly listed company, so none of my comments or the engagement out here or whatever I say can be construed to be the comments of the larger management or of the company. These are my individual comments and which are in a free-flowing discussion. Hence, they do not hold any legal sanctity or any data point for anyone to make any decisions whatsoever. Besides, since I am representing myself in a personal capacity and as was even requested by the DCIC cell, I would request all of you to ensure that whatever discussions we are having are strictly confidential and for the four walls or for all the participants for their personal use, not for any professional use and not for any claims to be made against the comments that I may end up making in a free-flowing discussion. The second point out here is, besides the disclaimer, whenever I'm doing such sessions, I'm usually extempore. I prefer not to go through much of literature or reading material because that makes it completely uninteresting. It is something that you could have also read into the book and happily comprehended that. So it's a free-flowing extempore session. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a lot of participants having questions. So more of a free-flowing discussion. The moment you have a question, I'm sure Hitin or Neha would have given the SOPs how to, work around on the Zoom or basically raise a hand so that, even if you need to disrupt me in some places, just disrupt me and I should be able to try to answer your query to the best of my ability. So let's begin the session today. Let me know, Neha, is that okay? Should we begin it now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So, it is an interesting topic. The topic, while represents an ever-going evolution, it was basically navigating the entertainment industry in, navigating the disruption in the entertainment industry. So, typically, when you talk about disruptions, it's a true fact that disruptions affect all industries, not just entertainment. Entertainment may be a very, very small sub part of it. And we may have certain relatable questions that I may have seen in my career and hence may be able to respond to it. But otherwise, disruption as a normal phenomena actually ends up disrupting most of the industry. So let me take a very small example and many of you would be able to relate to it. At the advent of the Android smartphones, there used to be a company called Nokia, who was the number one operator in terms of the mobile phones. They made the best phones and was definitely the global market leader. There came an Android smartphone. They were best placed to take care of the opportunity by innovating, by strategic thinking, by adapting, and perhaps by some amount of agility, which unfortunately Nokia did not demonstrate. And there comes another company called Samsung, which takes over that market, becomes the largest in the world, and today happens to be numero uno in Android smartphones, and the next door competition is very, very far away. While Nokia was best placed, it was not able to take the benefit of its existing resources by virtue of being non-agile, by virtue of being non-adaptive, and hence another player came in and took over that position. The disruption which hit Nokia could have been averted had the organization been more adaptive, agile. And this happens as a post-mortem narrative, which people like me end up saying to perhaps invigorate a discussion. But this is often a thing that is being spoken about post facto, post-mortem. Think about it, that you as the future generative entrepreneurs who are basically going to be representing the entrepreneurial world, if have a framework wherein you are able to work around taking the benefit of disruption to your industry. Statement seems difficult. It effectively means agility, adaptiveness, and perhaps an amount of innovation that needs to be brought into a system to, instead of getting disrupted, taking the benefit of diversity of disruption and evolve in the same business. So many of you could potentially come out with algorithms also as well, which end up defining before the disruption hits you. As they say, it's always better to change before it's time to change. So is the case with disruption. If it ends up disrupting you, you unfortunately do not have an option but to get disrupted, and the whole thing basically takes a backseat. Fortunately, with all the tools available today, and especially the data being evaluated on a much superior level to what it used to be in the earlier or yesteryears, today represents an option for many of you young entrepreneurs to be able to better see disruption before it hits the industry that you represent, or the business that you represent. Going on to an industry like that of ours, we have seen disruption. So let me take you back to 2008. I don't know who amongst you would have been would be able to relate to it. So there was a Lehman crisis which happened in 2008, wherein the global real estate industry went through something called subprime mortgage crisis. Effectively, that subprime mortgage crisis, while directly did not hit India, it hit US, but it had a very large impact on the real estate infrastructure industry anywhere in the world, including India. So in this 2008, when we were looking at our data points, and at that point of time, remember, the way you get data points today was not the way you used to get data points in 2008. You had to basically take out data from wherever available in the physical books or even on systems, and then decipher that data to beneficial use. Unlike the case today, wherein you have multiple AI tools available for you to be able to decipher the data and help that data let you take a decision. Now, when we looked at it, one of the things that became relevant was that while subprime mortgage crisis had hit the United States, it will have a far-reaching impact onto the world. Yet, India would be very less affected by it. Now, this data was coming in from the fact that the way real estate was getting transacted in India at that point of time was that a lot of money was, whatever money that you were buying the real estate for, was actually not the amount that you were showing into your books of accounts or you were registering that property for, which effectively meant a parallel economy, which was a strong factor being spoken about at that point. Good, bad, ugly. When we are looking at business, what we're considering is that what will be the impact of that subprime mortgage crisis. So what we were able to relate to is that, whatever happens in the United States on subprime mortgage crisis would have a very little impact on India. And it will only be a matter of time wherein this very industry picks back again, the real estate industry picks back again, and perhaps in the shortest possible time, unlike the case in other countries. Because banks are not going to get involved, people have already paid the money. Let's say if you bought a real estate for 100 rupees, you've already paid an amount of 50 rupees, and now 50 rupees, whatever is looking on paper, is where you have taken the loan. So no one is going to basically destroy his property for whatever he has paid for. So I'm sure all of you understand the term subprime mortgage crisis or mortgage crisis. It effectively happens that if you have taken some money from the bank, let's say 100 rupees is the cost of your property, and the banks are ready to lend you 85 or 90%. So you have taken 90 rupees. And if now your property falls below 90 and you do not have money to pay, you basically let the bank take over your property. You basically suggested to the bank that, hey, I don't have money to pay. Go ahead and take over my property. In case of India, why this was irrelevant was if the property value was 100 rupees, so 50 was not paid in check and 50 was to be paid in check. So the guy was basically raising finances on 50 rupees while the balance 50 had already been paid. So the buyer would never end up risking his 50 rupees and the real estate would not fall down by 50%. So that theoretically represented a classical case wherein subprime mortgage crisis is not going to hit India. So, at that point of time, I used to be with the same company at that point of time in 2008. And, what we ended up doing out there is we instructed or advised our various team members that go ahead, look for the finest real estate for cinemas which is available in the country at the least possible prices. In many cases, you will face a resistance wherein the guy would say that I'm not ready to give it to you. Throw that in the backyard. Do not even think about it. Move to the next one. So a company which was a tiny, miny company of something like 150 screens odd, we ended up signing in 2008 strategically 292 screens. We signed up 292 screens. And at prices which were unimaginable, because the impact of subprime mortgage crisis was that many of the developers were thinking whether they'll be able to palm off their real estate or not, and they ended up giving discounts because this was this asset class, which is called the retail asset class, had no knowledge how would this subprime mortgage crisis hit. While the residential had still some knowledge, but the retail commercial asset class did not have the knowledge that how is it going to impact, and they started rolling out discounts. We were able to take the benefit of those discounts, and till today, those discounts carry on and should represent a very good number of the valuation ascribed to the company today. Very good number. Because whatever was available at that point of time, 60, 70 rupees per square foot per month as a rental was a substantial rental. That became available at 15, 20 or a variable rental, which was like a percentage of revenues. And that still, because we used to sign deals for 15 years, at this point of time, we realized that let's not do it for 15, let's do it for 21 years. And the developers per se agreed. We were able to take that benefit for a very long duration of time. So classical example of how a disruption which happened on the global scenario, which affected the country in a little bit of a time, was beneficial to another company who was able to take the benefit. So it's just an example. So, 2008 goes and, 2019, 20, when the pandemic hit, was another disruption to industries across the world. Many industries got disrupted. And so did the entertainment industry, and especially the cinema industry got disrupted. Cinema industry, if you look at it, was the first one to close down and perhaps the last one to open. So effectively, this disruption hit it like really, really bad. Survival became, I would say, virtually impossible on paper. Not difficult. Let me not mince my words. It was impossible. The moment you looked at the cash flows, the moment you looked at the papers, the amount of money that was left in the system was only that much that could survive you for 6 months. And that's a normal practice. From 6 months to a year is what companies keep in their regular cash accounts. And if something survives more than that, which doesn't still bring in the cash flows, so companies become extinct. And this became a classical case wherein there was, on paper, it was absolutely clear that there is no life beyond this. The life of human beings beyond COVID could be there. The vaccine could get developed. But if this COVID goes on extending beyond 6 months, well, economic life is not going to be there for 27 or 28,000 people that we had at that point of time. Now, when we looked at paper, when we looked at our contractual obligations, it represented no possible option to escape. When you started thinking on the higher moral grounds, that, hey, let me basically seek help from my other partners. They could be in the film industry, wherein, they used to be the raw material suppliers, which is the films. So since, this is show business, so effectively, the people on the creative side could be actors, could be directors, could be producers, is actually the raw material. The films that they produce is my raw material. So they could basically help us, one way to look at it. The second was the second stakeholder, which is the development partners, wherein, who have lent us these malls. They may basically help us, perhaps not take rental for me because I'm closed. Third was, and which was an aggressive stand, perhaps the government, who has been taking so many taxes for so many years from individually from us and from the company, may come out with furloughs, which was the relevant case in many other countries, including UK, and UK, got great furloughs because, you were employing like 30,000 people. So the government could come out forward and suggest that, hey, don't take out people. We will basically give you a furlough so that you can give it to your team or your staff members, and they don't lose their jobs, and they can basically survive in this hard time wherein, they will also be going through financial difficulties. So when we looked at all these things, what we realized was that one community is of ours, which was the producers, the distributors, the actors, which is the creative community, perhaps even if had the wherewithal, would not come forward, because all the data points very clearly suggested that in the past, whenever a very small little disruption came in, or a very small little negotiation happened, they were too self-obsessed about themselves, instead of, coming to the favor of the industry, or instead of coming to the favor of the very artisans that they represent. So there are, people behind the screens for whom funds are needed if something happens to them during shoots and so on and so forth. But the industry has not been conducive to that. They have just been very conducive to what you see as the star powers, and they make the most money, and the guys below that actually end up struggling for their life. And so why would they basically help us when they don't even help themselves? And perhaps since they would not be producing films also, they may also get into a shell, and some of them may also have a problem. Someone is basically making a film already in production. Then came the stage of governments. We thought of the government, and what we realized was, in a country as large, the government would not be able to do much, because if it does that, its fiscal deficit would be so high that even if pandemic ends, they will have an endemic. Forget the pandemic. Even if the pandemic ends, they will have an endemic, because if they end up giving furloughs, we'll not be the only industry. They'll have to dole it out to many more industries. In which case, someone has sent this content of the meeting is being sent to a third party. I think you've sent it. Is it a standard Zoom thing that you're sending me?
It's a standard thing that it is being sent to the YouTube, like it's being licensed to YouTube. That's why
Okay.
it's showing.
Okay. So typically, we realize that the governments could not come in to us and basically, extend us that favor in terms of being able to, dole out that and suggest that, hey, we are basically coming in favor of you and not going to favor another industry, sort of a thing. And their fiscal deficit would be so high that it will mean an endemic for them, even if the pandemic finishes. So the third was the development partners, wherein we realized that these guys, we have been good with them. And perhaps at this point of time, they are the ones who could potentially extend help and come forward in terms of, helping us survive through this onslaught. Now, this became a classical case, and we picked up this thread at that time of the disruption in the industry. What perhaps I had personally not done for the last 15 years, I ended up doing again, which was like touching base virtually on the calls with all the development. We have lots of them, all the development partners in the country, one-to-one, and then even suggesting during the pandemic that we will end up traveling to you as soon as the possibility arrives, even if it is with a mask. But we have certain requests to make, and we have a way around wherein we could get some help from you and should be able to survive this onslaught. And, cutting it short, while this disruption was something which was very, very clear that this disruption is going to hit me and hit me bad. Since we were able to see that this disruption is going to hit, we started evaluating it piece by piece and looked at it at how can it impact me the least, point number one, or how can I take the benefit of this disruption, point number two. Pandemic was such a case wherein you were not going to point number two, which is taking the benefit of it, but how to survive and make 30,000 more people and their households, perhaps helping them in or extending a hand for them to survive. So, at that point of time, we took 2-3 strategic calls. One call was that we are not going to take out people. We are not going to tell our human resources that, we would not we would not be able to afford you, you go out. What we would do is we will start whatever has to start from the top instead of starting it from the bottom. It's a very difficult concept. Usually in organizations, it starts from the bottom. Two reasons. One, it's the lowest hanging fruits. Second, it does not create any legal complications for many industries, because at the top the legal clauses versus the ones which are there at many of the times is contracted labor. It doesn't really make a difference on the legal side. So we took a call that we would not start it from the bottom. Instead, we'll start it from the top. The way to do it at the top was, let's look at it that what do we need to save, and either give some people an option to take a VRS, which means a voluntary retirement scheme, or perhaps all the people at the top, we have certain levels, M1, M2, M3. So all the people at the top take a haircut, which effectively means, if you're getting 100 rupees, you said, okay, I'll be happy to work for 50 rupees till such time we survive this pandemic. So, using that as a mode, and VRS was something no one really took, and most of the people actually accepted the haircut. It was a mathematical equation, an algorithm which was worked out that let's do it this way instead of asking people to leave at the bottom. We did not ask the people to leave because they were our strength, which were going to carry the word also forward. So think about it from a narrative perspective. The narrative is not only going to me internally, the narrative is also to the government, wherein my people, they're large in numbers. They are going to have some sort of a voice wherein they are saying, see, look at it. My company helped me and they're basically still helping me survive. Similarly, this narrative was also going to the development partners whom I was going to seek help from. Many of these people are connected, and this actually went to the developers also as well. And, this became a positive thing for us. And, anywhere between 1,000 to 1,200 crores of rental we could not pay, and all the development partners with open hands extended this help to us, suggesting that you guys are not operating while we also do not have revenues and we were depending on these revenues. We are ready to let go of your rental. We are ready to let go of the expenses, which was like common area maintenance expenses, some of them being fixed in nature. So I would say 99% of them ended up giving us those discounts, and which amounted to 1,000 to 1,200 crores, and which helped us survive through this onslaught. Disruption happened. This disruption could have potentially killed. We were able to survive through that. by virtually looking at the things from out of box strategic perspective. On paper, yes, we were dead. But was there something beyond the paper? Yes, there was. You needed to look at the fine prints. You needed to look at strategies which are out of box. You needed to look at things that, which were even on compassionate grounds, because they also are grounds on a human basis. So we ended up using that, and that we were able to go through that disruption. That disruption goes. The next disruption basically is standing right at the anvil for us. The disruption being that OTT was not hitting us. 2019 was perhaps the best year in the industry, of the cinema industry, and there were great revenues that came in. 2020, the pandemic hit, and once the pandemic goes, we start our business, and the last ones to begin the business, as was mandated by the governments. When we begin the business, we were very, very gung-ho, and for a few months, that gung-ho thing really, it really went through also, wherein because of people not having been able to come out of their homes, they actually thronged cinemas. Any film, any content that came in, they were happy to throng to the cinemas, buy the ticket, and just be in the cinema, watch it in a social environment. But this was very short-lived. What had happened during this pandemic was most of the people got habituated to consuming content on OTT, and that became a reality. Even people who were not in the habit of consuming content, so let me take an example, people above 65, 70 years, who were going to the temples, who were going to the parks, who were going for a physical based exercise, were not able to go during the pandemic time. They were not people who were even watching content. Even they got inducted into content, and they also got used to OTT. And OTT again took benefit of this. While there was one disruption on one side of the industry, OTT got benefited out of it very, very big time. It was able to establish its mark. Besides establishing its mark, it was also able to suggest that we have created a new habit, and habits don't die, or habits die hard. They were absolutely clear, and they became very, very aggressive. A film producer usually ends up producing the film by taking money from the investors, banks, at times, pre-selling the distribution rights, pre-selling the music rights, ends up raising the finance, some of his own money, some of the money raised from various sources, ends up producing a film. Then he basically gives it to cinema theaters. They give him some returns back. Post the cinema theaters, it goes to OTT, bases the performance it has done on theaters, standard model. The standard model got completely disrupted. When the OTT guys realized that, hey, we have created a habit, for the first 3-4 months, people came to the cinemas, and after that, it is depleting down. People are just getting back to OTT. They just want to watch the content on OTT because, it represents a far more empowered environment. Anytime, anywhere. That's the concept. While, when we run cinemas, we basically run it on fixed time shows, and we are basically saying, no, it's not any time. It's our time, and you have to come. In case of OTT, it is anytime, anywhere. I want to basically watch my content anywhere, at any time I can do that. Now, they played on it. But what they did was, again, and this is business, it's not something good, bad, ugly. What they ended up doing is they started in an inordinate way. I would not name people, but yes, there have been many OTT channels wherein they basically, the OTT people, they started funding producers. They said that now we are the unthrown kings. Nothing is going to happen. And they started funding the producers that, hey, just release the film direct to OTT. You don't need to go to something called theaters. They are something of the yesteryears. This is basically, the sun is set on that industry, and that industry is gone now. And the film started straight away going to OTT. Think about it. You have come from an environment of huge disruption, which is the pandemic itself. Having survived that disruption, you come out, you basically feel that, oh, everything is over now, we are doing pretty well, 3-4 months. And then the next disruption hits you, and which is a far bigger disruption, because in terms of pandemic, everyone around you on a 360 level was most likely disrupted, unless you were an OTT channel or you were producing oxygen. Okay, you were hit. Now when you get hit on this disruption, this is big, because not the other people getting hit by it. You never really imagined that this was coming, and it came. Films started going directly to OTT. Producers were getting funded left, right, and center from the OTT guys. They said, pick up the money, produce the film. It's on our coffers. Release it direct to OTT. Thereafter, if you want to take it to cinemas, it's your call. But, any sane person knows that if after that it goes to the cinemas, there are no watchers for it. Again, at that point of time, the time was exactly similar to what I mentioned in 2008, or I mentioned about Nokia at one point of time. The time was to basically put your head down onto the table. There are two options for you. One is close it down and, work around on a decent business, or perhaps walk out with whatever you have. Easiest way, because that's what everyone would like to take, because that's a very, very easy way of living life, to say that, oh, this problem has come in. When I look at the papers, it's absolutely clear. All the data points so suggested are very clear that, hey, just move out and there's nothing left to it. The other was put your head down, start deciphering the data. It has happened good for you for 4 months. 4 months, people were coming back. After that, they stopped coming back because, the habits died and so on and so forth. Is it that you need to spend more on marketing? Is it that you need to improve the stickiness for your consumer to come back to you? Or you need to really look at the economic drivers. When I say the economic drivers, would OTT be able to afford what it's doing, wherein it is funding films without seeing it and without having a creative ability? When a producer or a director makes a film, they have a creative ability to be able to foresee if they're mounting a film. They have a better creative ability, not if they were 100% correct, then all films should be hit. That's not the case. They have better creative ability. So then that's the reason. And creative abilities are very difficult to acquire. It's not easy. So this strategy should have its flips, wherein, while OTT may be very, very large, you're talking about not millions, you're talking about billions, and that too in multiple numbers, multi-billion-dollar companies. But still, if they're multi-billion-dollar companies, their wrong decisions are also going to make them losses into multi-billion or multi-billion at least. And look at it, I would not say that you need to have a streak of luck when you're doing business and, everything. If it was 100% sure, then, there would be only a P statement, never a P&L statement. It's never 100% sure. That's the reason you have a P&L statement in business. You can have losses. So typically, it went through. OTT perhaps realized it in a period of time that this was resulting into magnanimous losses. Even if they got the brand new films, even if they ended up funding the producers, the $7.99 price per month is not moving up. The consumer base also was not moving up. In the middle, what they ended up trying was they basically came up pay-per-view. Again, a very limited take of pay-per-view. I'm not saying in the future it will not come in. So what may not be relevant today may be relevant tomorrow, because that's how the process of evolution happens. But typically, the financial side of the things, as our side of the industry or a couple of us had basically related to, happened in that direction. The other thing that we related to, that now the consumer is habitual and more habitual towards consuming content. If he used to spend 2 hours on content every day, now he spends 4 hours. How do we ensure that we get our 50 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes of his day back to the cinemas? I mean, that's the average that we are talking about. So this became another point. And as soon, the OTT guys basically stopped funding the films, the films started coming back to the cinemas. the windows started getting resurrected. Windows in our case is that if a film gets released on an X platform, let's say hypothetically cinemas, how much is the window for it to release onto the OTT? This window used to be 12 weeks, fell down to now maybe close to 8 weeks is where it is. But 8 weeks is a reality in India. While in the other parts of the world, it is basically like France, it is 12 weeks. So, and hopefully, it will go to 12 weeks in a period of time. But that represented a great comeback again for the industry. While this disruption was there, you were able to put your head down and put around a strategic thing. Sorry. So let me say that you were able to push your strategy to a point wherein the future data points are going to represent your future, not the present data points. Because if you take the present data points, they are clouded. When I say the present data points, whatever was happening in the OTT industry, you'll have to give it time. That would they be able to survive that production of films at their money and then basically supporting them on OTT channels? And a little bit of extrapolation, and of course, a lot of if I can say that risk-taking ability. You need to have that risk-taking ability. Most of the risks can be calculated. Some of the risks cannot be calculated. The ones which cannot be calculated, you basically need to have certain other matrices, which is more driven by strategic, the strategic thinking, which helps you take those calls, perhaps in the right stride, and sometimes even in the wrong stride. That wrong stride is the L in the P&L statement. So, that's what happened, and we were able to navigate through this disruption. And, when you say that, are you out of the woods? I wouldn't say yes. In a business world, you get hit by disruptions every day, which is smaller disruptions. The mega disruptions like a pandemic also cannot be ruled out. And I don't rule out that sort of a disruption again coming to the cinema industry anytime soon, whether it is connected to innovation, whether it is like, let me take a very small example. The way digital and AI and other tools are helping aid other industries, it has to help the cinema industry also as well. Perhaps the new breed of people like you, who are youngsters, who think innovatively, who are able to think out of box, who are able to think better for the Gen Z and the alpha and so on and so forth. So, perhaps they get into the industry, they think differently, they will need to be imbibed into cinema industry for this industry to do better and evolve on the next level. And it can be hit by that disruption because OTT from that perspective is very, very young. It's able to think young, it's able to execute young, and it is able to execute digital. In the parlance of a cinema, even the digital people who manage the digital portfolios in a cinema company are nowhere close to what digital is doing on the other parts of the world or other parts of the industry, wherein very young, dynamic, agile people are sitting who think digitally. So there could be another disruption like that which could be basically hitting, and you have to again survive that. You have to again start thinking about the perspective that there has got to be certain data points which are going to be deciphered, and the tools available today are going to help you. Beyond those data points, whatever is still remaining onto the risk side, you have to wear on your strategic hat and go ahead and take certain calls with an amount of risk being involved, which remains uncalculated. But you are able to still go ahead and take those calls on the basis of a strategic thinking and certain amount of risk-taking ability, with the hope that those decisions would turn out right and you would be able to navigate the next disruption which is going to hit the industry. Saying that the disruption is not going to hit the industry effectively means that this industry is null and void, because if disruption doesn't hit it, that means this industry is not being looked by anybody else. Disruption must happen in an industry. If the industry remains undisrupted for too long, that means it's a dead industry, it's a sunset industry, because no one is looking at it. You are the only one looking at it. Perhaps you are thinking that it's a monopolistic state, the others are thinking that this is not an industry worth to be in, and the sun has already set on it. So disruptions are bound to happen in a business which is evolving, a business which is being seen by people to be the one which represents a possibility for the larger world, larger masses. So that's where I'll rest my case. Thank you for your patient listening.
And sir, we'll be heading the questions to you now. Like we have a couple of questions on the YouTube chat and the Zoom chat as well. We'll be asking some of the questions.
Sure.
Um, right, sir. So the first question which we had was, with the growing popularity of OTT platforms like you mentioned, is there any way for traditional cinemas to actually benefit from that growing popularity? Or do we have to necessarily consider them as, competing interests?
So absolutely spot on as a question, and this is something which I end up speaking at many, many, many forums. Till such time both these factions think about themselves as competition, they will only have difficulties. The day they start to think of a universe, entertainment universe, wherein both of them can collaborate, they will be performing much, much better. And you're absolutely right that this day is going to be sooner than later, because people like you who are young, who are agile, are thinking like that these two platforms can collaborate and basically give a benefit to the end consumer as well as benefit themselves also as well. Let me give you an example around that. Which is the last soap opera that you watched on the Netflix or any of the OTT platforms? Give me a name.
So I think I was watching Mad Men recently.
Okay. Now, let's say I give you an option that two options are available from a business perspective. The first episode of the first episode of season 1 is available to you on cinemas a month in advance. Okay, before it really hits the OTT. But the second episode is available to you today. So effectively, there are two options with you. Either you can start with episode 2, which you would never like to do because you'll not be able to get the context of that, or you wait for 1 month for the episode to hit the OTT platform. Else, go to the cinema, watch the first episode, and then begin from the second episode at your home. Imagine the business it will create. Second, let's say the climax, which is the last season, the last episode of the last season. I suggest to you, hey, if you want to watch it today, which is in continuation, get onto a cinema screen. I will give you an environment which is exactly similar to what you basically watched within the tele screens, and much, much more immersive than perhaps your, home screen. And watch it here. Else you have to wait for a month. So you ended up creating an ecosystem which converged, collaborated, and works well with the consumer. So let me give you an example. So in Pakistan, there is a soap opera for which they did that very recently. While, we have been only talking in India, I've been talking at multiple forums. They did that recently. Pakistan has very, very limited content that hits the industry in terms of the cinema content. They have reasonable amount of cinemas. All the cinemas for that episode, which was the climax episode of the soap opera, choco-blocked 3 times the price of ticket. Now, this is a classical case of how a collaborative, coexisting environment can be formed, but for which you need young minds like you who are beyond the ego. Today, what really happens in businesses, and I see that too often, is a tag being given to a CEO who is old, very, and another CEO, they don't see eye to eye, because of which many, 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 many businesses end up suffering. The moment that ego goes out, perhaps that's what will bring the business up. And it is to people like you, the young generation, who have to get this ego out and start making the businesses work on collaborating, coexisting environment, coexisting platforms. And that's how businesses would survive better.
Right, sir. Thank you for that insight. Thank you, sir. I think that answers that question very well. And the next question which we had was, you acknowledged that the COVID-19 pandemic was especially disruptive for the entertainment industry. And we saw that PVR and Inox had a strategic merger post COVID-19. So, how do you think that this merger helped like the business as a whole recover post or from COVID's effect? And what strategies did you all especially implement for this measure?
So, in this case, if you look at it, the optionality is finished. Had these two companies, or I would say at least one of the companies, had to survive alone, it was impossible. So I would not name which, but one of the companies would have had to die because of the competitive pressure and the pandemic having hit, had it not merged. Amongst the two companies, PVR Inox, one of the companies would have died. They would not have been able to survive the onslaught. So it was a compulsion, point number one. Point number two, this was once in a lifetime opportunity that was available to you as per the stipulations and the regulations that are mentioned as per the Indian rules. So there are certain rules wherein if you have 1,000, if your turnover is less than 1,000 crores in a certain domain, then you can merge. So that opportunity was once in a lifetime, and hence the benefit of that opportunity came in. Third, in an industry this large, you also have to remember this industry still has lots of middlemen who are involved. Classically, brokers representing your property, distributors representing your film, and so on and so forth. The size would finally determine that whether you need middlemen or not. Today, many of the companies who have gained size, whether they are on e-com, q-com, or they are on physical platforms, moment they gain the size, they are able to make better financial sense by leveraging the concept of economies of scale to get the middle people out who are supplying you this stuff. So in this industry, for that to reach, you need to increase the scale. So this was a golden opportunity for us to be able to take the benefit. And I'm very confident that in the next few quarters or the next few years to go, lots of economies of scale are going to turn into the favor, wherein you would not need middlemen to represent you, properties, films, and so on and so forth.
All right, sir. Thank you for that answer as well. Um, w- Considering that we are seeing a lot of old movies being re-released recently, like for instance, Rockstar or like Ye Jawani Hai Diwani, what is the strategy behind the re-release of these old movies, and how does this benefit cinemas specifically?
Okay. So two things out here. So one, you have to look at the gap which was available. So the United States, the Hollywood industry was on strike last year. Okay. Because of which the content was not available. Very, very limited content was available this year. Point number one. Point number two, in terms of the Bollywood films, especially the genre of Hindi films, with the advent of OTT gaining momentum, the consumer base has become more intelligent, more sharper, and is looking forward to better content. So Bollywood was not able to deliver that quality of content the year that passed. The content was perhaps at best sub-average. So I'm using the words perhaps at best sub-average. They were still sharpening their eggs. They were still sharpening their knives in terms of, what to give to the consumer. So it's that evolution, it happens. And during the pandemic time, the evolution happened faster for the consumer. Because of which there were too many gaps available. Now, either you keep the cinemas vacant or you bring the nostalgic films back to the cinemas. So we thought of it. In fact, one of our, very, very able managers in working with us, no qualms to suggest his name, Saurabh Singh, he coined the thing that, let's get the older films and create the nostalgia back at the cinemas. And what we realized was releasing the older films is going to be like event. You're doing an event which is around nostalgia and so on and so forth. And it actually worked like that. So many of these films, what they made in their first release is lesser than what they have made now. right? So this was a classical case because this event went on becoming large, and it's like, how old were you when Ye Jawani Hai Diwani had released?
I don't remember the exact age, but pretty young.
Exactly. Perhaps you had not seen it, or even if you had seen it in the first release, it was not a relevant context, or it was not a relevant content for you. Today, when you look at it, it's very, very relevant. And you still want to go and see it because it basically gets you to the nostalgia of what made a relevant content for your folks at that point of time. Now is something that you're watching. So there's a connect out there. There's an ecosystem out there. And lots of people have gone back for that ecosystem. So this basically helps us that you could potentially have lots of older content being brought in, and which can have a nostalgic event base around it, and represents a possibility for many age groups, many age groups. In my years, Star Trek used to be the sci-fi series which used to come, and it used to come on Doordarshan, I believe. Today, if it is brought to OTT, I would perhaps watch it like crazy. Or even if it is brought to cinemas with some episodes, I would basically love to get back into that nostalgia. Now, so many of these content has a lot of IP value, which is not getting the intellectual property value, which is not getting extrapolated. In the years to come, we would see lots of this happening, and not just happening onto the cinema screens, perhaps even happening as an event-based program. The way it happens, The Lion King can be produced into a show. So could some of the Indian films represent that possibility?
Thank you, sir. That revealed a lot about consumer psychology as well. One last question. Considering that entertainment is a legacy industry, like a pretty old industry, how can a new person or a budding entrepreneur break into legacy industries like entertainment without having too much capital backing, without expending too many funds?
So let's basically, bring more clarity to the question that you had, which is with lesser funds or bootstrapping, if I may call it, getting into the entertainment industry. So one of the fundamental things in any business, not just this, if you want to make airplanes tomorrow, don't get constrained by the fact that I only have X amount of money in my pocket today and I want to make airplanes. Because if you look at anybody, you can take up any successful entrepreneur. When I use the word success, measure it, successful, it was never the money which made them successful. It is their concept, grit, perseverance, and their belief and passion which held them to the businesses that they are doing today, and are whether they are multi-billion dollars or trillion dollars, they are those businessmen because they had all those five things on the product side. Money actually flows in. So de-link both the things. For it could be not just entertainment, it could be any goddamn business on Mother Earth that's there, de-related to money, because relating it to money is the easiest excuse which 99.9999999% people who work for others like me end up using as an excuse to not doing business. They say it needs money. How can I do business? So these are the classical people who end up being employees and not entrepreneurs. This is a classical example of employees. And I include myself into one of those, not into that 0.00000001. These lesser known or the entrepreneurial side, dealing the money, so they have grit, they have perseverance, they have a passion, and besides that, they basically work in today's world. They work in a more organized fashion than what used to be happening in the earlier days. Entertainment is no different. You can get into any facet of the entertainment industry, whether you want to get into production of content, whether you want to get into showcasing of content. All these facets are available. Why not basically put it through an example? Let's say hypothetically, I represent a cinema industry today. Okay. Let's say you as a budding entrepreneur wants to get into a cinema industry today. You want to own cinemas. You say that I want to have cinemas like PVR, I know, sort of a thing. How would you get into it? Start mapping out your journey today by writing it out, that what will be your start point and how would you like to? Would you like to basically start from something wherein you invade the minds of development partners digitally? That's possible today. It wasn't possible yesterday, but today it's possible, wherein you are able to reach to them digitally, suggesting that this is the concept and you would like to take over the cinema. Or you could basically work around certain models wherein you seek investors on one side, that hey, you guys invest into my venture, this is how the cash flows work, this is how the whole feasibility works, would you like to back me? Because I can create a brand by doing this in a period of XYZ years, and fast track it, because I have all the digital tools, AI available to me to fast track it than what the other companies in the yesteryears do. Similarly, if you want to make content, multiple channels. So one of my friends recently, she used to work with me in one of my erstwhile, private equity firms. She has started an app wherein all the facets. You want to be a budding star, you get into that app. You want to be a director, you get into that app. You are an investor, you get into that app. You basically are a stuntsman, get into the app. She has created an ecosystem for someone to make content. So from actors to anybody is getting in. So because lots of people today are saying that they want to be actors. If this app even puts up a fee for you to get in, potentially the people who want to get in, they'll get in, and perhaps she has done that also as well. And she is getting the likes of the bigger stars coming in, delivering certain lectures, and engaging with the students and so on and so forth, or engaging with the aspirational stars, and that is gaining momentum. Imagine that something which was not possible yesterday, today is possible. Reels, short films are a reality today, wherein you have people like Nasiruddin Shah acting in short films. Who could have imagined someone who was even not ready to work on a television screen today working for Reels? Because the consumption of Reels perhaps is the largest in the world in terms of content consumption. So there you go.
Thank you for those amazing answers, sir. Now we'll be moving on to the closing speech.
Thank you.
As we conclude this insightful session, we are confident that the valuable insights shared today will benefit our attendees in their future pursuits. Mr. Pramod Arora has truly embodied their sense of entrepreneurship by inspiring us to navigate disruption in the entertainment industry and tell our stories in a way that captivates and impacts others. On behalf of the Entrepreneurship Development Cell and Incubation Center of St. Xavier's College Autonomous, Kolkata, I sincerely thank Mr. Pramod Arora for sharing his vast knowledge and expertise. A special mention to our respected principal, Reverend Dr. Dominic Savio, SJ, and Vice Principals, Reverend Dr. Joseph Kolendai, SJ, Reverend Dr. Peter Arokium, SJ, and Professor Bertham Da Silvia for continuously encouraging us to pursue greatness and live up to the great Xaverian reputation. I also extend heartfelt thanks to our faculty advisor, Dr. Arup Kumar Mitra, for his steadfast guidance and support at every step. We sincerely acknowledge our attendees for being patient, interactive, and for posing such thought-provoking questions. Last but not least, I extend deep appreciation to the members of the Entrepreneurship Development Cell and Incubation Center for their dedication, timely execution, and unwavering support in organizing this event. The credit form will now be rolled out in the YouTube live chat. Attendees are requested to fill it immediately.
Thanks, Ashika.
Thank you, sir.
God bless you guys.
Once again, thank you all for tuning.
Just a second, guys. Let me confirm.